I'm plant pathologist Ted Zwicky. I'm doing this little video to give you information on how to do a technique that involves transferring a lesion from one pear bait to another one. This is primarily useful for users like nurseries that are involved in leachate baiting tasks, using pear baits, or other folks that are doing pear baiting with field or nursery collected soil samples, soil root samples primarily. So there are really two situations where this comes into play. First, if you're in the situation where you have some lesions developing on a pear, and for instance, you have a pythium lesion close to a Phytophthora lesion, you might want to separate those because pythium will overgrow that other one fairly quickly. So you can transfer from the Phytophthora lesion or the suspected Phytophthora lesion to another pear. The other situation would be where you have any variety of lesions and you're going to send a pear bait into a lab to have them diagnosed, but you're at a kind of a bad timing in terms of the lesions might grow together or the pear might go to pot before it gets to the lab over a long weekend or some other situation where you can't get the pear to a lab to have it processed in time. So this is a way that you can essentially preserve the lesions essentially by transferring them to a fresh pear, restart the clock, and then have a chance to send them in a reasonable timing.
So to start with, we're going to get the pear that we're going to inoculate, a clean pear, and with diluted bleach solution, 5,000 parts per million chlorine, we're going to dip that for 45 seconds, roll the pear around so it gets all parts of it covered with the bleach during that period, and then set it down on a clean napkin or other paper towel. Now we have to do the same thing for the pear that we're going to transfer the lesions from. In this case, we see a number of different lesions on this pear, which we're just using as an example here. Again, we're going to surface sterilize that for the same 45 seconds in the diluted bleach, again rolling it about to make sure all sides get coated. And then as we take it out, don't put it back on that first napkin that it came off of because that's contaminated, but put it onto a fresh napkin. Okay, so now we have both a pear that we can do the transfer to, and another one. We're gonna let those dry off for a few seconds before we start working with them. The next step here is to do the prep the clean pear for inoculation. So what we're going to do with that is using a thin bladed sharp knife. I'm using a scalpel in this case, but another type of knife with a thin blade would work. You don't want too thick of a blade because it'll take a long time to cool down after you flame it. So I'm dipping that scalpel into 90 to 100% ethanol or isopropanol, and then lighting that off to flame off the instrument to sterilize it. So we want to do that a couple times at your first go around just to make sure everything's clean, but make sure the flame's all the way out before you re-dip it in your alcohol. I'm using a little handheld butane torch here, which is pretty handy for works like this. Okay, once that's been flamed off, what we're going to do is cut a couple of V-shaped couple of incisions here. So a little less than maybe a half a centimeter, a little bit more long, just through the epidermis. We don't want to dig a lot into the underlying mesocarp. And then after we've got that V shape, we just flip up the edge using the knife edge till it's loose for future use. And that's that. We'll just tap it back down and demonstrating one more here. When we're you can space these out on a pear and do several on a pear, particularly from the same lesion, but if you're using different lesions, you want to label each one, of course, as to what it's doing. So there's those two slits again, and we're just going to flip up that bit a little bit, and we have a little V-shaped flap there. So the next thing we're going to need is the pear that we're going to transfer the lesion edges from. And so I've got an example pear here. It's got quite a few different lesions. They look different, and you might want to try one or more of those in this case. But we're going to go ahead and use a pair of forceps, not the knife, to grab bits of that stuff to transfer. So we're going to flame off a pair of fine tip forceps first. Same procedure, go ahead and dip it, flame it off, make sure the flames are out, dip it one more time, and go ahead and flame it off one more time. And then we're going to grab just the epidermis from the edge of one of these lesions. So I'm right at the edge of the lesion, and you can just kind of dig into it a little bit, and then you're going to tear out a little piece of that affected epidermis, about a couple of square millimeters or so. And then once you have that, all you have to do is, we've already have the flap loosened here, so we can just take the forceps and just slide that piece of material underneath it, pat it down a little bit, make sure it's all making good contact back with the pear, and that's the inoculation. So the next thing we have to do is cover it so it doesn't dry out right away, because the infection might not take in that situation. So Scotch tape or clear tape like this is one of the easiest things to use. You can just get a piece of it and stick it over the flap as shown here. Other alternatives would be parafilm, which is kind of a laboratory film that's just sort of a waxy material. Or you could use a sort of a stretch wrap or a cling wrap, just regular plastic wrap. And here I have a couple of different lesions on that, or a couple of different inoculation points. And so I can use the same piece to cover all those up at once. So pretty much that's how you do the inoculation, and it's ready now for future incubation. So after about the first day or two, all you're going to see is a little light discoloration around those areas, some oxidation really. But by about the third day, you can start seeing lesions, and those can develop quite rapidly for some species. In other species, as this one we're showing here, the development is, and this is actually about the slowest one we've ever seen, that after a couple of days, of course there's nothing. At 4 days, you're just starting to see some development. 5 days, you can see it's a little bit beyond those cut marks on both sides. It takes 9 days to reach that size, and even after 16 days, more than 2 weeks, the lesions haven't totally overrun the pear by any means. If you compare side by side Phytophthora cactorum and this species Phytophthora taxon, you'll see the difference that you have after just 4 days of incubation. So this is a technique that if you don't have access to a lot of lab equipment or materials, you can still take your pear baits and transfer some lesions to clean pears, so you can deal with large, messy sorts of batches of pears and still get them processed in an effective way at a lab. If you have other questions about soil phytophthoras, you can look at the link at the bottom of the page.